Hello viewers and welcome to our ongoing lecture series on theories of mass communication. Our topic of discussion today is called the dominant paradigm and media, and to discuss this topic we have with us Mr. Shomo Shubro Das, who is a professor in St. Xavier's College, Kolkata. Welcome, sir.
Thank you.
I am Shantanu Mukherjee, a student of media science. So tell us, sir, what is this dominant paradigm all about and how is it really related to media?
Yes, dominant paradigm is a kind of a theoretical structure which was developed only after Second World War.
Okay.
As we proceed with the slides, it will be slowly, understandable for us. Before we begin, I would like to say something that all these theories, dominant paradigm and functionalist theories, you will find a lot of theories in our mass communication syllabus. But what I would like to tell you and all our viewers and students is that these theories are based on our daily lives and the way we live our life. We live in a structure, we live in a society, we live in a kind of a world which is infested or made great by a lot of technologies. We talk about development, we talk about our institutions, family, politics. So everything is intermingled, right? And in the middle of everything, we have media. The way we are discussing it here is a part of media. I'm showing you the PPTs, it's a media. My voice is being recorded, it's media. I get my knowledge from the media, I get my entertainment from the media, I communicate with my people from the media. So media is everywhere, it's all pervasive. Okay, and within that, within the reach of the media, we have the influence of dominant paradigm. Okay. Now, slowly I'll get into it, but again, what I ask you is not to take dominant paradigm as a hardcore theoretical structure, because this is a kind of a theory which is related to us, which is related to our daily lives. Okay. Now, this dominant paradigm, this structure of thoughts and strategies, was developed only after Second World War in 1949. Because the question of development for a lot of countries became pivotal, became very, very important. Germany, Italy, France, Soviet Union, these countries were devastated by war. And if they were not devastated by war, countries like in Asia, in Africa, they were devastated by colonial exploits. So the first world country or the politicians had to, or the economic planners, they had to plan something which will contribute to the development of these countries. So it was aligned with the development of the media world. So how do we develop the people and their mindsets? It's because we can disseminate our thoughts of development through media, books, films, radio, television, and nowadays we also have internet. Okay, this is primarily a Western model for development which predominated in the 1960s and 70s. So this is the genesis of this dominant paradigm. Now, it envisioned development as a challenge to bring the underdeveloped countries, mind you, the underdeveloped countries, out of their conditions of poverty by, the first one is modernization of the third world. Of course, if you have modernization in a poor country, a lot of things will be facilitated. And then another is a little bit, you need to know your economics few terms, it's called free market approaches. Just for our viewers and you, I would like to say that free market approach is something which we relate to capitalism, absolute capitalism, which is there in America. There are forms of capitalism. The way in which our economic lives are dictated, it's capitalism. And free market approach is something where any competitor or any businessman can enter the market. And there will not be any state intervention. So predominantly the structure believes in the ideology of capitalism and not the ideology of communism or socialism, which were two camps after Second World War. Mainly the communist and socialist Russia, they had their own economic policies, and another one was the Western Bloc, which is the Western European countries and predominantly United States. Now, we will just go through the influence and the various features of this model. The first one is the influence of dominant paradigm was at its peak during the Cold War. Mind you, we know what is Cold War. Cold War is a kind of a proxy war which was fought between the two superpowers which emerged after Second World War, United States and United Soviet Socialist Republic, the USSR, which is now Russia. Now, the media became a battleground between the USSR and the US, okay, in terms of development. So both countries had their visions of development. Both countries wanted their domination throughout the world, and they used media to a great extent. Okay. But dominant paradigm, this structure came necessarily from the United States. Now, modernization paradigm promoted by political scientists. So, political scientists are strategists who strategize the political moves, the economic conditions, okay, and they promoted the idea of modernization throughout the world, especially in the third world countries, with the help of media.
Okay.
Now, media, what kinds of media? Of course, print, cinema, radio, television became a site for the competition of the two ideologies. One is the dominant paradigm and another one is the socialist paradigm. Okay, we are not talking about socialist paradigm. We will be concerned and we will limit our discussion to dominant paradigm.
Achha, sir. Then this dominant paradigm and this free marketplace of ideas,
this is not a free marketplace of ideas, mind you.
Okay.
It's a free marketplace of commodities and business.
Okay, free marketplace where you can launch your own business without the government intervening in your business.
Yes.
So isn't America's development paramount because of this
yes,
ideology?
of course. There is this term called American exceptionalism.
Okay, what does that mean?
It means that American capitalism is entirely different from the whole world. Because you will find that according to Mr. Ford, what America wanted was people who were workers in the Ford manufacturing company can own a Ford car themselves.
Okay.
And that's almost a part of American dream. That's from which the genesis of the dominant paradigm came. Modernization, free market approach, and then there will be development. Okay. This dominant paradigm is all pervasive in every aspect of social life of common people. That's the more important part. That's why I was telling you that we should not deal dominant paradigm as theoretical impetus or theoretical. It's there in our everyday life. The Second World War mass media in the US concentrated on 4 aspects. One is the ownership pattern. Of course, the free market comes, the ownership. The question of ownership is there. You will find that the development it's a late development, but the development of Google, it's a huge, and the question of ownership becomes pivotal to it. So the ownership should not be governed by the state. That's what the dominant paradigm says.
Indeed.
Okay, centralized in operations. So all the operations, even if there are branches, it will be centralized. It will be governed by the central authority.
Yes.
More national in approach in the sense that if an international company comes to your village, they should localize the strategies of their business according to your needs. So that's why in Kolkata we find KFC written in Bengali.
Yes.
Okay.
So that people can relate to it.
And it will be a nationalist and a localized touch.
Indeed, yes.
Okay, which will do nothing but it will convince you to buy the product more. And more pervasive in presence. Now, in this regard, I will just give you one example. Pervasive in presence in the sense the commodities, and it's a free market. You'll find that in case of beverages, the dominant ones, there's monopoly of Pepsi and Coca-Cola.
Yes.
Of course.
Obviously,
and you will not find the local drink called Bijoli Grill, just for an example. Okay. So it's pervasive in the sense that we know Pepsi is there, but their dominance in media, their placards, their ads, they are everywhere. Okay. The puja pandals are full of Pepsi ads. It's not that they are trying to, remind us. It's there that they want to stay in our minds. So it has to be a kind of a developmental strategy based on free market, based on business, which will be there in our minds. Okay.
Okay.
Dominant paradigm is often termed as the development in the influence of a kind of a social development as well. A kind of the thrust is social development. Okay, sometimes our viewers and you might ask, sir, is there any contradiction between free market and social development? If there's free market, there might not be social development. So these are the questions which this strategy of dominant paradigm faced in later years. Okay, by this developmental model can be achieved and implemented through these various ways. Increased productivity.
Okay.
Of course, if your products, the number of and the commodities produced are more, of course there will be a huge revenue generation and there will be a kind of financial development. Okay. Now, economic growth and industrialization through heavy industries. Okay, I'm not talking about the small scale industries. I'm talking about heavy industries which the dominant paradigm invested upon. Capital intensive technologies. Now, technologies which are made at home or artisanal technologies will not do. Technologies where investment of capital and generation of capital is important.
Okay. Robots can be an example then.
Robots.
Okay.
Automation. Okay, automation is a very important part of dominant paradigm.
Okay.
Because modernization, technology, and more productivity.
Okay.
And centralized planning, which we discussed earlier. Centralized planning, there should be a central planning committee who will be governing the branches. Okay, so that there's unity in its function. Usually development by this paradigm is measured by gross national product, GNP, and by per capita income, which is again, we are talking about dominant paradigm which was dominant even in the previous decade. Now we know that gross national income and per capita income might not be the markers of development of a country. Okay? Lerner and Schramm, these are very important people who developed and supported this dominant paradigm and implemented them in the media. It's as early as 1964, and you can well imagine that it's a time of the peak of Cold War.
Yes.
Between USSR and
Yes,
US. And we also know that the advanced mode of capitalism only started during this part. These professors and these thinkers, they supported the dominant paradigm, they implemented it in various fields of studies, advocated automation and technology for development and change. So what they felt was that technology and automation was pivotal in the development and changing the condition of the third world. They made significant contributions in identifying the role of communication for technological development. Now, we might have been guessing that it's a kind of an economic debate, and where's this mass communication and media part comes. So this is a very important part, that the most important weapon for dominant paradigm is communication. Okay. And we know that media is a form through which communication is made possible. Now we will question the very idea of development. The idea of development will be different for different countries. Development for you might not be development for me. Okay.
Well,
there cannot be the same yardstick of development for each and every continent and country and people.
Of course, no.
Okay. So it's very interesting to go through what is development, what is dominant paradigm, thinking about it, and where does media come into it.
But isn't development synonymous with urbanization?
Well, nowadays we have started understanding it might not be.
Okay.
Okay. For people who will have advantage in urban structure, of course, urbanization is good for them. But think about people who are not equipped in their consciousness, in their social life, in their philosophical life, in their political life. They don't know what is urban, how urban life is. That might be a little debatable. Okay.
Okay.
It's better for us, for the viewers, for us, to not to be conformist in these senses. Now, the development community argued that the case of underdevelopment in the developing countries was not due to external causes.
Okay.
In the sense, let's say World War, capitalism, globalization, all these things are not the causes of underdevelopment. That's what the speakers of dominant paradigm
Would say.
would say.
Okay.
Okay. But due to the internal causes present within the nation.
All right.
So the lack of development is due to the internal pressure. But one thing, of course, you will understand that we were, before the Britishers came, before the colonization started, we know that we were one of the richest nations in the whole world.
Yes.
Okay, much, much richer than Europe.
Yes.
And colonization started. East India Company, one of the first MNCs, the first MNC of the whole world, and they exploited us. And then what happened? Colonization is exploitation, of course. And what happened was all the riches and plunders went to Europe, and they started, industrial revolution.
Yes.
Okay, so it's not always that the internal, internal problems are the reasons of development. Not all the times. Of course, we have corruption, we have traditional beliefs. Okay, we have anti-modern stances, but not always. So colonization is an external influence, and which contributed to our, underdevelopment. The individual as well as who is within the social structure. So the underdevelopment is also for the individual of the society. Sometimes it is, sometimes it's not. Media can play a big role in changing all these things.
Okay.
Because
how is
media generates a kind of an ideology, a kind of consciousness,
that? Influence.
which
Okay.
might influence us to change our lives. Because media is the only way through which authorities can communicate to us. For Lerner and Schramm, media's role was pivotal in development, as we were discussing. Lerner identified 4 indices of development. Now, how do we think that a country is developed or underdeveloped? So, by these 4 things: industrialization, literacy, media exposure, and of course, political participation. People have to be mobile, emphatic, and participatory for development. So the common people has a huge role according to the dominant paradigm for Lerner and Schramm. So people have to be very active. They have to play an active part.
Democracy.
Democracy, maybe consumerization, industrialization, everything.
Yes.
Along with media exposure and literacy.
Yes.
Okay, so all these 4 factors have to be there for development. How would media influence people to accept the dominant paradigm for developmental changes? So media, of course, we know that we are surrounded by media. Our consciousness, the way we perceive beauty and God and everything is from the media. The books, television, nowadays we have smartphones. Yes. Okay, so media can influence us on 4 levels: cultural, technocratic, political, and economic. And I would like to say that these 4 elements are interrelated to each other. Your technocratic, your economic base will change your political view. Your political view and your political stance might change your technocratic, attitude, or your attitude towards technology and how you accommodate technology into your life. And that all these 3 things will change the cultural life. Now, of course, there's a little jerk to what we are doing right now, a kind of a sarcasm to this developmental idea of dominant paradigm, which was put up in a film called
Fight Club,
where he's saying that this is the main character, where he's saying that we buy things we don't need. With money, we don't have to impress people we don't like. Exactly what we do. So that's a kind of a dramatic and sarcastic take on the dominant paradigm.
Indeed.
Now we will discuss the 4 facets, how these things are related. First and foremost is the cultural life. Modernization advocated for a change in the mindset of the individuals in poor countries who had to abandon traditional beliefs. Now, there's a kind of a dichotomy in it. Dichotomy in the sense that traditional beliefs that we have, especially in Indian culture, sometimes they are hindrance to our thought process, hindrance to our development. Of
Yes.
course, in this regard, dominant paradigm is absolutely right.
Okay.
So we have to get out of the traditional beliefs which are kind of stops us from thinking in a free way. So modernization might change that view, and with modernization and dumping away all the cultural, not the cultural but the traditional beliefs which stop us from any kind of progress should be discarded, and that can be possible only through media. Now, I think all of us will agree with that. The second is the technocratic level. Modernization required people with inquisitive minds who were guided by faith in the scientific method. Now, let's say sometimes we are guided by our faith, God, fear of religion, and that's why we do not touch a lot of technologies. There was a point of time in Indian community where most of the people thought that if their portraits are made, they will die.
Yes.
Okay.
I read about it. Yes.
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 So, that was the kind of a belief which stopped us from exploring our lives and making progress. The political level, it required staunch advocates of the doctrine of liberalism based on political freedom and the adoption of democratic systems. So,
Okay.
democracy for any kind of development, democracy is very important. Democratic structure is very important, and you have to
Participation
be
of people.
political liberalism.
Okay.
Liberalism in the sense you have to accept the views.
Of
You have
whom?
to be views, all the views,
Views of everyone.
everyone, and then
Okay.
there should be a kind of a liberal thought process. It shouldn't be stopped and hindered by prejudices, whether you are believer of God, whether you are communist, whether you are capitalist. There shouldn't be any hindrance. Okay, that's why the political level, at the state level, at a bigger level, at a macroscopic level, you have to have that political freedom where liberal thought process and democratic system should prevail.
I see.
Okay. Sometimes in India, let's say, a lot of villages are there where women's liberation are, women are used just as any other commodity.
Yes. Very oppressed. Yes.
Very oppressed. Okay, they are
Yes.
burnt as witches and all these things. So these things have to be, these are the hindrances for development. Probably these are the internal causes, which Lerner and Schramm was
Indeed.
talking about. The economic level, which is the most important one, it required blind faith in the virtues and power of the free market with no or minimal government intervention. So that's what we were. There lies the problematic part. There should be any kind of faith. If it is blind, then we are again, it's almost kind of becomes the traditional belief. Okay, so a kind of a faith and virtue, what economic level is talking about, is the kind of a blind faith and virtue has to be there on the power of the free market. Free market in the sense, free competition. There should be no government intervention. Okay, modern society is a participant society and it works by consensus.
Okay.
So modern society, by this paradigm, is a participant society. So in one way, free market and participant society in one way leads us to absolute consumerization. For this, the ethics of capitalism had to be propagated through the channels of various media. Okay.
Okay.
So if you are buying something, you might think that you are contributing to the development.
That is how I am taught to believe. Led to
Exactly.
believe.
Exactly.
Okay.
And you have not reactionary, but you have films which question this kind of thoughts, like the Truman Show or
Okay.
the Fight Club.
Okay. Yes.
So I think we will stop here.
Okay.
Okay, and I'm sure that our viewers will have a lot of questions and a lot of debates to ponder upon. Thank you.
Thank you.